It's good to be up here this morning. I'm excited to get to talk to you about what the Lord has laid on my heart, what He's been working in my life. As you know, Pastor's been on a well-deserved vacation. So I thank God. I thank God for him. Pastor just doesn't come up here and have to do the sermon every Sunday, which I really appreciate that he prepares his sermon every Sunday, because doing it yourself, you realize just how much work it is and how nerve-wracking it can be as well. But he gives so much, and he works so hard, beyond bringing a Sunday morning message, visiting people in their need, and running and organizing the church. Just a great organizer and a great leader, and he does so much that you may not even see. So I thank God for him, and I thank God for his gift to this church, and the time that he and his family, himself and Jackie and even the boys have dedicated to this church. And God has really blessed us with them. And I'm thankful for them, and I'm thankful for you, and I'm thankful to be here today. How long do I need to go? Thank you. The hardest part for me, do I get slides or do I not? Yes, I get slides. Okay. The hardest part for me is carrying on a 30-minute conversation without anyone being able to talk back with me. So I usually don't talk a lot. The joke in our house is that on Sunday I get all my words out in Sunday school class, and then I spend the rest of the week quietly saving them up until I have to speak again on Sunday. So I will do my best to use up all of our time and to say what's truly needful and important, and hopefully to be a blessing to you. So today I wanted to talk about making space in our lives. And so what do I mean by that? We're all really busy. I mean, we live in a busy world. We live in a world where there's lots of distractions, and it's easy to get really focused on what's happening in our lives and to miss out on making room for what's happening in other people's lives. And that easily happens. It easily happens in our world where we are busy. I mean, I'm busier than I've ever been at work. It's absolute madness, and there's less people around to do the work. We're distracted. Oh, let's see what Facebook has to say. We're easily distracted, and there's so much stuff that vies for our attention, right? And then even with all the recent events with pandemics and that, it's become so much easier to isolate ourselves from each other and to just worry about us and our issues and survival and just getting by. And so I just wanted to encourage us today about intentionally making time and making space for others and for those around us. And this whole sermon, the whole idea, it came out of a personal experience that I had. And that was me and our family as a whole went through about a month where life seemed to be absolutely nonstop. And there was no break. It was just coming off of Vacation Bible School, and Vacation Bible School is a fantastic time. But it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of time on the side, and so you go to work, and then you go to Vacation Bible School, and you come home, and you go to work, and you go to Vacation Bible School, and you're running it, and you're being involved, and it's a lot, but it's great, and it's an awesome, positive thing, right? And then, we had family troubles going on, so, in the background, we were helping out with those things and being a support there. And then we had a couple of funerals happen, and one of the funerals that we went to, it was tragic, and it was, I don't want to talk about the details, but it was one of those things where you just kind of have to sit down and say, I can't believe that something that tragic happened so close to me. And there we were at a funeral where You just go there and you kind of sit down with everyone else, just trying to figure out what happened, and being close to each other and comforting each other. It's the best you can do. And then we were helping people move. It's like we turn around, every time we turn around, we're helping someone move and load it up in the car and take a day off of work and drive it over here and drive it over there. And that's great. I'm happy about that. We get to do that, right? But we were doing like our second move. We were helping my wife's grandmother move out of her house. And again, it's another really emotional time because she's been in the house there for 20 years and coming to the point where she needs to be closer to family for assistance. We're moving her into an apartment. And so again, so much activity going on and so much time spent, and we're running back and forth. And I had just carried a couch up 3 flights of stairs. And after that, I went outside, and I'm sitting there, and I'm tired, and I'm overwhelmed, and the little voice starts talking on the inside. I'm tired. Why am I doing this? I should be at home cutting my grass right now. Why can't these people get their lives together? Why is it that we're always the ones? And the Holy Spirit didn't waste any time. He was there just like that. And in his gentle, tender mercies, he went, "Steve, stop it." And he made me realize something. He said, "I have given you blessings of resources and energy and health and strength so that you can be here doing this. So that you can be carrying a couch up 3 flights of stairs. And not only doing that, but helping other people get into a place of stability and peace so that they can have the opportunity to enjoy the same blessings that you get." And that perspective really helped me see my life and how I live it and what I choose to do with my life and my time in a different way. We all have a fixed amount of time and an unlimited number of things that we could be doing. So what should we be doing? What should we be doing with our time? And if God has given us health and strength and resources, we can be using that time and making space, like I've got here, making space for others to help meet the needs that they have. And so I want to look at what are 3 things that happen in our life when we decide that we're going to make space for others. What happens when we decide to make it a priority to be open to the needs of others and willing to share our time and our energy and our efforts to make their lives better, to meet the needs that they have, to come alongside and be a comfort. Hey, look, I have this. So that's my question. That was my question. What happens when we open our lives and make space for the needs of other people? And I think the first thing that happens to us is that we become better managers of the gifts that God has given us. So in 1 Peter 4, 8 through 11, if you want to look there, Peter is encouraging the Christians, and he says to them, "Above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. As every man has received the gift, so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man minister, let him do it as of the ability which God giveth him, that God may in all things be glorified through Jesus Christ. To whom be glory forever and ever. Amen." This passage is encouraging the Christians to use the spiritual gifts that God has given them. And we are all differently gifted spiritually. Some people have awesome gifts of prophecy and studying the Scripture and applying it and preaching it to us. Some people have fantastic gifts of compassion There are people in our church who have amazingly compassionate hearts, and they use that gift. And then there are people who are excellent organizers and managers. I am not one of them. Organization is not my thing. But Peter was telling the Christians here to use their gifts and their talents and resources for the benefits of others. And it's like we say, we're blessed to be a blessing. But the important thing that I wanted to take out of this passage is that he tells us to be good stewards of the manifold grace of God. God has shown us so much grace, but we need to be good stewards. And a steward is what? A steward is a manager. And managers manage resources. So do you have a budget? Do you manage your resources at home? Or do you have a clerical job? Maybe you do taxes or keep the books for a company or something like that. You're a manager. And you're a manager of resources. And you realize that resources are limited and they need to be prioritized. And we all have different depths of resource than different people. I think of teachers. I just remember back to the days when my kids were in kindergarten and they were in first grade, and we would take them off to kindergarten to drop them off at the door, and there was a kindergarten teacher with a big smile on her face, glad to meet the kids, and there's like 35-year-olds in the classroom running around and yelling and screaming and playing and having a good old time, and I drop the kids off there. And then we leave and we go to work for like 6 to 8 hours, and we come back 6 to 8 hours later, and the teacher greets us at the door, and she's still smiling. And the kids are still having a good time when we pick up our kids. And I'll tell you this, if you locked me in a room with 35-year-olds for 8 hours, I would not come back smiling. I don't have that gift. I would be curled in the corner cringing. And so like God has divvied up to us individually like different kinds of gifts in different amounts. I had a 5-year-old and 6-year-old, so yeah, I have some grace for that. I don't know if I have grace for 30 of them. But, God has given you grace in certain areas of your life to be a blessing and to use it for other people. As good managers of the grace that God has given us, we need to realize that our resources are limited. The money runs out at the end of the month, right? And we need to realize that we can use the gifts and the grace that God has given us wastefully. When you're young, I see some young people in here. When you're young, you have lots of time and lots of energy. And generally when you're young and you're using your time and your energy, what are you doing? You're running around and driving too fast, or you're worrying about, does this boy like me? Does this girl like me? And then you spend hours a day just kind of worrying about what everyone thinks about you. And you have so much energy, and it's good because you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to waste a lot of time. You're going to have to make up for all of that. But man, when you're young, and the old people, which I am slowly becoming, would totally tell the young people, don't waste your time. I mean, when you have energy and when you have the time that you have, man, what an opportunity to be getting your life together and finding that first job and doing well in school and building good, healthy relationships with lots of friends and lots of people. Because you get to the point in your life where those resources of energy run out and life starts shoehorning you into a role and a job and caring for a family, and the opportunities to go and grow in those ways are rapidly passing away. And so you have to be a good steward. You have to be a good manager of that time and energy that God has given you. Some people use up their emotional resources. They get themselves into relationships that aren't good for them. And they keep going back to unhealthy relationships, which just suck the life out of them. And so they don't have much left to give back after that because they weren't able to walk away from a relationship which was unhealthy for them. and move on to something that would be more positive in their life. And so our resources need to be prioritized. And so when we look at all the things, that we have to do, that we can do, we need to put a priority on serving the Lord and then making room for the people around us. Calling your grandmother on her birthday, showing up for your friends when they have a need, being there when someone needs to move, no matter how you feel about it. So prioritize your resources well. In our house, we have a bedtime routine with the kids. And it's always been that when they get ready for bed, we'd sit with them and talk for a little while, and we would read. And just go over some stories with them. And they really like it. My son, he's like 9, my daughter's 12. She's getting to the point where she does all her reading on her own. But my son and I, one of the books that he really likes has a lot of the, short bedtime stories in it. And they're the fairy tales, and they have the parables and the morality tales. And one that he liked, and one that, I secretly liked, was the story of St. George and the Dragon. And I've got a picture of St. George and the Dragon here, and I'll tell you why he's up here in a moment. But the story of St. George and the Dragon is that Sir George, as a knight, he was a knight in a city. And in his city, all the men had work to do. They worked well in the field, and women sang as they worked, and they had harmony one with another, and the children were safe, and they played happily in the forest. There were no wild animals to threaten to them. And he lived in this pristine, beautiful city. One day he came to a realization. He looked around and he realized, everything in my kingdom is perfectly in order. And here I am, I'm a knight, and I should be doing things that knights do. And so he left his kingdom looking for a place where he could be of a benefit with his skills as a knight. And so he traveled as far as he could into a land that he had never seen before, and he came across a place where the houses were empty, and the fields were trampled and burned, and there was no one around. And he thought, perhaps this is a place where a knight can be of service. So he continued riding on his horse until he came to a walled city. And as he walked up to the walled city, the gates of the city opened, and a maiden dressed in white started walking out, and she was weeping. Aha, there's my opportunity. So he galloped off to the maiden and asked her, "Dear maiden, why are you crying, and what is happening around here?" And so she told him the story, that there was a dragon that had been tormenting the city, and it had burned the fields and had eaten up all of their livestock. And so the people had been hiding in the city, feeding the dragon their sheep for breakfast, and when they ran out of livestock, the dragon demanded that they send out a young maiden, or else he was going to burn the city down. Well, of course, St. George was having none of this, so he goes off, and as you would expect in any knight and dragon story, there is a mighty battle where he fights the dragon. At this point, Eli would get off the bed, find his wooden sword, and go slay our dog. He slays the dragon, and of course, he marries the princess. He takes over, he inherits the kingdom, and he brings it up to a state of prosperity like he had seen before. But the reason I tell you this story is based on what he says. He comes to that realization where he says, "These people are all safe and happy. They need me no more. I shall ride away and never stop until I find work which only a knight can do." And I think one of the traps that we fall into in life is that we get all of our lives in order, and we've got our bills paid, and our houses are clean, and we have the cars that we need, and then we start looking for the next thing to do. And so what we do is we double down inward. We keep focusing on ourselves. And we don't realize that there are so many other opportunities around us where we can use those resources and talents that we have to help other people, to bring other people up to the same state where they can have that peace and stability that we enjoy as well. It's our responsibility to get our lives together so that we can help other people. And, one of the great things about that is that, it gives us a sense of meaning and purpose in our life as well. It feels so good when you know that you can do something positive and helpful for someone else, well beyond anything else. So what else happens? We discover that we have more space than we thought we had. Well, Steve, I don't live in a fairy tale world. My life is difficult. And you're right. The majority of time when God is calling on us to be a help and a support to someone else, we don't have everything we need. Your friend needs to move when you're tired and you've had a long day at work, right? Your kids are having a meltdown at the end of the day when you've had a rough day at work and you just don't have the emotional resources to deal with that. I don't need that right now. But something awesome happens when we just trust God and we do what we know is the right thing to do. And we just continue serving despite the lack that we have in our life. Let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Second Corinthians 8, 1 through 3, it's the Apostle Paul. And he was dealing with a church in Corinth. And Corinth was a commercial center. There was a lot of wealth in the city. There was a lot of wealth in the church. And Paul wanted to talk to this church about giving and what the heart of giving looks like. And you're used to seeing this passage when we have missions conference. And Paul says, "Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God." He says, "I want you to know about the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, how that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves." You see, the Corinthians were wealthy, but the Macedonians were not. They lived in poverty. And here's Paul. Paul was trying, this is what's great. Paul was taking a collection. He was going to each of his churches to take a collection. And he was going to take that collection back to Jerusalem, and they were going to use the collection in Jerusalem to feed the poor. And so here's the church at Macedonia, poor themselves, finding a way to give so that they could help other people in the same situation that they were in. You see, a generous person, despite their lack of resources, still finds a way to give. And like I said, we can be broke in ways that don't involve money. We can be tired, we can be impatient, we can be hungry, and we can be grieving. And it's in these times that we need to do giving. We need to be giving in ways that are beyond our power. By way of illustration, I had the opportunity in this church when I was a teenager to go on a missions trip down to Veracruz, Mexico. And as a middle-class American brat, it was a very eye-opening and beneficial experience for me. Because one of the things they did for us is they took us to an area, I believe it was called the Colonias or the Colonials. And it was a shanty town, a lot like what you see here, where the homes were just made out of plywood and corrugated steel. And I think they said there's something like 100,000 people living like this. Dirt streets. It was dirty. There's feral dogs running around. And here they took 20 teenagers and gave us a stack of gospel tracts and said, "Here, hand them a tract, say, Dios te bendiga. God bless you. Cristo salva. Christ saves." And here we go. We went out through the village or through the town, handing out tracts. And then we had some of the locals with us, and they were inviting the kids to come out to a vacation Bible school. And what struck me, being I forget what I was, 16 years old or so like that, is that here were these kids who lived in poverty like this. But when we came through to pick them up for vacation Bible school, they came out of houses that looked like that, houses that looked worse than that, and they were wearing their best clothes. And their best clothes that they have were their school uniforms given to them by the government, pretty much. And they came out wearing their best clothes, cleaned up, and you know what? They were happy. And they showed up for the vacation Bible school, and they had a good time. And that really made a powerful impression on me, because I saw the poverty that they had, but despite being in that depth of poverty, they were still able to have a good attitude and to be happy and to have fun and to have dignity. That really meant a lot to me. A lot of times we say that, I don't think I can go any further. I don't think I have patience. I don't think I have the time to give myself and to use my resources for other people. I just don't have it. But, we can give beyond our power. And that's often what serving other people does. It shows us that we actually have more to give than we feel that we do. And God supplies. God supplies when we're at our wits' end and we think we can't. If we're faithful and we just do what's right, God's going to give us what we need in order to be a blessing as He's called us to. The third thing that happens when we make space for other people, and this one's my favorite, and we'll close things out after this, is that we grow into the image of Jesus Christ. And we're going to see this in Luke chapter 17. In Luke 17, starting in verse 5, Jesus had just told His disciples, His apostles, if your brother sins against you and he comes back and asks for forgiveness, you need to forgive him. And they said, okay. And Jesus said, if your brother sins against you and he comes back and he asks for forgiveness 7 times in a day, you need to forgive him 7 times. And the disciples said, it's kind of hard. I don't know if I can do that. And so Jesus responds to them. He says, which of you having a servant, plowing or feeding cattle, will say unto him by and by when he has come from the field, go and sit down to meat, and will not rather say unto him, make ready wherewith I may sup, and gird thyself, and serve me, till I have eaten and drunken, and afterward thou shalt eat and drink. Does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I trow not, I think not. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say, we were unprofitable servants. We have done that which is our duty to do. Jesus tells them a story. First He tells them, if you had faith. And a lot of times we think that faith is enough to get us through. Jesus goes on, He says, you need more than faith. And He tells them this story, and what happens in the story is that there's a man who works in the field. And he plows in the field. So here he is. He has a manual tool being dragged by buffalo, by horses, by what have you. And it is an intense manual labor job. And he spends all day in the field doing hard manual labor. And at the end of the day, when he's tired and hungry and dehydrated, he comes back to the house. And does the master say, all right, take a load off? No, the master says, your work isn't done. Now you need to serve me. And so, after spending this whole day doing manual labor, he has to serve his master. He prepares the food. He draws the water from the well. He brings it to his master and lays it on the table, and he waits the table as the master eats. And he's tired, and he's hungry, and he's thirsty. And finally, when the master's done eating, he clears away the dishes. cleans everything up, and the master goes off to bed, and when he's done serving the master, then he gets his chance to eat and to care for himself. And we look at this, and Jesus says that obedience is just like this servant here. Us being obedient to Jesus Christ is just like living as his servant. Loving one another is a command. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Men are going to know that you are my disciples by your love one for another. And it's a command that we love and we be open to each other. And that's a hard thing. Jesus says, if you don't go so far to love one another, if this servant does the bare minimum in his life just to live, he says he is an unprofitable servant. He says he's worthless. That's really hard. And so part of love is obedience. But the thing about obedience is that understanding follows experience. And so oftentimes in life, we just have to do the right thing, even if we don't feel like it, even if we don't understand it, because it's when we do those things through experience that we come to understanding. We understand why it's so important to love people. As a parent and looking on my whole life, almost 40 years, I understand and I know where my kids could go. And you watch your kids who have so little experience in life and where they could be headed, and you as an adult know, and so you tell them, don't do that, do this. Make your bed, put away the dishes. And of course, the kid, oh, I don't want to, it's so hard. But the obedience is good for them. They don't have 40 years of experience. They don't get it. And we don't have the mind of God. So we don't often see the full scope of why he calls us to do things that are so difficult as giving of ourselves and loving other people, in their time of need, even when we ourselves may need the same support and love. So we love other people and we open our lives to them because we're commanded to. But then we love other people because it's good and right. And as my dad says, because it builds character. I want you to consider what kind of a person this servant is. You might say that, well, he's whipped and spineless. He just does whatever he's told. Or he's a slave and he has no other options. But think about him. He works manual labor in a field all day long. He's strong. And he has stamina. He probably has to think ahead about everything that he has to do. He's responsible. He knows it's going to be a long day. He's committed to doing all of his work. Even after his work is done, he still waits on his master. He's patient. And he's self-disciplined. And we also see that he prioritizes other people's needs above his own. He's humble and loving. If this servant has a good heart, then his service does him well, and it builds his character. Because he can't do all of those things with a good attitude if he does not have a good heart. Think about this. Have you ever sat with a person who is grieving and just been available to listen to them? A lot of times we don't want to be around grief because we don't want to deal with that feeling. Let's not deal with that sadness. I don't know if I can take that. But when you sit with a person who's grieving and having problem in your life, and you let your heart break too, that builds empathy. And you feel for that person in a way that you didn't before. And you can take that and you can apply to other people. And we start understanding people in an entirely different light when we're open and vulnerable and grow empathy through the experiences that we have. The church did a service project down to Detroit. we were taking food down to Cass Park. And it was on a Saturday morning. And, for our family, it was one of those things, Saturday morning, I got to cut the grass. But we're like, we should do this. And so we went off and we helped out, and we brought the food and provided for them. And it was in November, and it had snowed. And there was probably like a foot of snow in the park. And in the middle of the snow, there were tents. And there were men living out in those tents, veterans living in those tents, homeless. And seeing that, absolutely humiliated me. Just brought humbleness into my life, seeing that people lived and suffered in that way. And if we're not obedient, and if we're not just doing what God has called us to do, and if we don't open up space in our life to allow those experiences, we don't grow, right? We don't grow as people, and without that growth, it limits how much good we can do for other people there and out. As we open our heart to people, we grow into the image of Jesus Christ. We love each other. We love people because it reflects the person of Jesus. And Christianity is not about just being happy and positive all the time. I'm a Christian. No. And Christianity's not about thinking positive thoughts. Well, we're gonna have faith and think positive thoughts through this problem. No, that's not what it's about. Christianity is definitely not about a life of ease and making sure that we have no problems in life. In fact, it's the opposite. Christianity is about living our lives like Christ and doing good. And that involves confronting our sin, which is not easy or pretty. And that involves stretching ourselves and reaching out to other people. And it requires having a right heart. We can't live like Jesus, being dragged the whole way, kicking and screaming. We have to do it willingly. Jesus Christ died on the cross. He gave his life for our sins, for our redemption. And as Christians, we're called to do the same thing in a small way, day after day, over and over. Day after day, we have to die to ourselves, die to our needs, die to our wants, so that we can serve others and bring life to other people. And what I think is so amazing, and what gets me the most, is that when we do that, we're literally embodying the Spirit of Jesus Christ. When we submit ourselves to him and we serve him, it's as though we are being him. And how amazing that we get to be the vehicles of grace and love that God is using in this world. And why would we let our petty tiredness or lack of time or what have you hold us back from getting that opportunity of being someone who's being used by God to do good things for other people? So in conclusion, when we make space for other people, we become better managers of God's gifts. We discover that we had more than we thought, and we grow into the image of Jesus Christ. We get to help others. In our church right now and around us, there are people who have need. Great need and great grief. And what an opportunity that we have to come alongside and to be an encouragement to them. And you can't always power through. One day, you're going to be that person. One day, you're going to be that broken-hearted person who needs someone to come along beside you. And you'll certainly appreciate when someone has made space for you to share the love of God in your life. All right. Brother Mario? Brother Mario is going to come and he's going to lead